possibly a bitch, don't say anything you don't like, and maybe a witch. The point is, she should have been awarded the justice like anybody else should have been awarded justice. And the fact that she didn't, and the fact thousands of women and men like her didn't, was all the fault of John Knox. I know there were other people involved, but I'm sorry, I have to go ahead. Now, I don't know what was wrong with John Knox. Maybe he's married and he cuddled enough when he was growing up, but he certainly didn't like women. The problem was that the minute he wrote his book, the first trumpet against the monstrous regime for women, when he wrote that power was unnatural to women, and that women who had power must have it from an unnatural and therefore a diabolical source, he signed the death warrant of thousands of Scots, women and men. We have records for about 4,000. There were other records that were missing. Possibly up to 6,000 people were dragged from their families. They were terrorised. They were tortured. They were brought to trial and they were executed. And Agnes Finney was one of them. People say to me, if Agnes was such a terrible witch, if she was in league with the devil, why did the people that taught her go to Agnes? I'll tell you why. Because there was no one else to go to. Whilst Charles I was on the throne, he had a camel staying out at the stop and it was fed sugar lumps called Fitzy Tiffy Bell, whatever I was called. And he got a regular report on this stupid camel and how well it was fed and how well it was cared for. Well, the people of the Potter Row were dying of starvation and malnutrition. 4 out of 5 children didn't make it to their 5th birthday. And the only doctor they had was Agnes. And the only person they could go to was Agnes. And when they couldn't pay their rent, there was no bank for them, they went to Agnes. When their children were ill, there was no doctor for them, they went to Agnes. And when they couldn't feed their families, when he put up the tax on salt, and when he couldn't warm their families, when he put up the tax on coal, Agnes was there. Yes, she was a bad-tempered working class so-and-so. So what? Bad-tempered people are allowed to exist. I'm one of them.
So, for example, the Cumberland Square 8, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, and I was actually thinking about maybe doing 8. Unfortunately, we can't fit it in. And actually, I found a piece by the poet, and I'm glad I found a poet because it's mostly poets here today, John Keats, who wrote about it. And he said, a letter written in 1818, having just seen the dance performed outside the Sun in Ireby, Cumberland, he wrote, "They kick it and jump it with metal extraordinary, and whisk it and fleck it, and toed it and goad it, and twirled it and wheeled it, and stamped it and sweated it, tattooing the floor like mad. The difference between our country dances and these Scotch figures is about the same as a leisurely stirring a cup of tea and beating up a batter pudding." In there he's quite astute, because he points to one of the differences between the English and the Scots, as I'm sure you've detected there.
If I pierced you with a piece of broken glass, and in an instant I regretted it. We chatted on, the usual, when will this ever end, hardly see anyone these days, and all the while the sun blazed down, a giant golden spoon, tap, tap, tapping on our heads so hard.
Our third attempt to reintroduce Sir Walter Scott to the country of his birth and to his own people. As you all know, Walter Scott, perhaps our most famous novelist, is not being read, and for good reasons, looking at the socioeconomic position of particularly our younger generations today. Red Gauntlet is a superb adventure story. It is not a true historical novel. It does not drop fictional characters into a known historical landscape, which is the genre invented by Walter Scott himself. But Red Gauntlet is a wonderful character and worth reading about. Red Gauntlet is a military machine. He is a borders laird who has been right through the Jacobite Rising, the great one of 1745, 1746, and survived. He comes from a long line of border characters. And I noticed earlier, nobody's here from the Priest in Galloway. There will be borderers here, including me. And Red Gauntlet is one of us, taking part frequently in the traditional great activity of the medieval borders.
Next year is actually the 50th anniversary of one of the most important books of its time, the Red Paper on Scotland. The editor was a long-haired radical student rector of Edinburgh University, none other than Gordon Brown. His introduction was a clearly argued radical statement calling for public ownership, workers' power, and wanting to force the pace towards socialism. What's absolutely shocking about that book is that out of the 29 writers, there wasn't one woman. I can't believe it. It's absolutely incredible. There were great writers in it, but no women.
Look out over Fife, which some people advise against. From Edinburgh, you will see two particular hills, the Lomond Hills. The name Lomond means they're fire hills. These are places where fires, ritual fires, used to be lit, but they have another name, and their name is the Paps of Fife. They are so called because they look like the female breast. And when you look deeper at the various Paps around Scotland, you will find that virtually all of them have stories, ritual sites, archaeology, and very often interesting landforms as well, because they all reflect quite strongly beliefs that were held here before the Christians came. And the evidence for this is everywhere. In the Gaelic-speaking areas, it all kind of hinges around a figure called the kayak, who is generally seen as the haggard one.
Kick about. These games are won and lost in moments, in trips and snatches, trips and fullbacks. Plant your feet, raise your heads, and look what you have done with games lost and games won. Our expectations grow because you made it so. Tonight, wide-eyed, my daughter watched you play. She dreams of being you one day. Her jacket's in the wash again, bogging, masquerading as a goalpost. She's ditched her school skirt for a football strip and plasters her walls with pictures of you. She doesn't measure her team in inches. The mud splats and missed shots bring her back to that centre spot where she will rise and fall and rise again.
Something about my dad. So my dad did often throw in the form, but when he did, what he wrote as his occupation was revolutionary communist, and what he wrote for religion was militant atheist. And those were the beliefs that took him to Spain, along with 3 others who are featured in this book. The thing that I want to say is, though, that my father's bequest to me has not been didactic, absolutist, this is how it is. In fact, there was another dimension to my father, which is something really wonderful, and that is that he was a man who questioned himself and questioned around the world around him and cared for people and wanted to see how he could actually make a difference in this world. I work in a bookshop, and to give you an idea of the range of people I have come into the bookshop, in the last 2 days I've spoken to someone talking to me about playing chess with Alistair Gray. There has been a guy who was a Tunisian who started a publishing house and published with his mother and grandmother and published a feminist perspective on the Quran. And today just left an hour-long talk with a man whose job was in the CIA. And he was incredibly interesting. They all are. I have an opportunity to listen to these people. The reason that this is what keeps me alive is that you have to realise we all come from different backgrounds. We have to listen to each other and try and find, because in this room there are people with all different belief systems, and we have to actually find the common ground. We have to try and imagine a future that is going to be better than the one that is than what we have at present.
Even more of storytelling, extraordinary diversity of talent and sort of interplaying with the evolution of the city, eventually its emergence as the capital, and of course a national literary tradition which sits in the international perspective. So I'm just going to take one street very quickly, right? We're in Blackfriars Street. Blackfriars Wine, just round the corner from my old house at the Storytelling Centre. So right at the foot there, the first publishers and printers in Scotland. Look at the trouble that started. Cardinal Beaton's house, where they held the feast to welcome back Mary Queen of Scots. Look at the trouble that started. Where Shakespeare's company performed 3 times in Edinburgh, in a temporary theatre set up there by James VI. The Earl of Morton's townhouse, still there near the top. The man who murdered Darnley, who organised the heavies, did the dirty business, and then got guillotined for it. Less well known, Ossian Macpherson and his lodgings in Blackfriars Street, in a flat below Professor Blair while he produced his epic. A haunt of Robert Louis Stevenson. By the 19th century, Blackfriars Wine had become a reality of poverty and destitution, of gin shops. Robert Louis Stevenson and his encounters with the darker side of Edinburgh hung out there.
The shepherds came the bitter old men. At Springham, 2 girls with ripped jeans get on, loudly not at school. The men's voices received whispers. They were not expecting youth to recoil as if before radiation. Getting off at Castle Douglas, the girls stand aside to let them by. Age before beauty, one says. I'll say it before you have a chance.
There's something solid and reassuring about Sunday in the villages and small towns of southern Italy. In Cassino or Lecce and elsewhere, Sunday has its own smell and feel. Early waking to skies and promise and well-being for this day, and maybe hope for every day. The sky at 6 a.m. is clear, the air is cool, the land is in gentle harmony. Hens scurrying and scratching in the backyard, bird song, insects buzzing and chattering, and the smell of something tasty in kitchens across the countryside and in the streets. When I'm there, Sunday is the best day of the week, and all the better, all the simpler, all the more direct an experience the further south I go.
And they retired to Hollywood to construct a Scotland more recognisable to themselves and to their cinema audience. The flattening implication for Scots is that the Americans bought into a Scotland which transcended its actuality and simply did not, could not exist.